G'day, welcome back to the 40 channel. So, front end is totally finished, which is pretty exciting. Dad's come around today, so he's going to give me a hand. We're just going to strip all the back out. We're going to change the rear bearings and all new brake assemblies, all that type of stuff. So we'll try to get as much done as we can today. I've just wasted, I don't know, an hour looking for stuff, haven't I, Dad?
That's it.
We semi-cleaned the shed just to try to find some bits and pieces to get this job going. So, just a bit of my frustration. But anyway, let's get into it.
Right.
Nope, you might want to spray them all with some R1.
It's a bit stuck on there. Let's see what this does to it.
Right, you rattle the wheels off. I'm going to drop the oil out of the diff. Wow, that oil is super clean.
Ah.
Look at that. It's like brand new oil.
Okay.
So we've got spider heaven here. We've got a huntsman spider here. What else we got? Right, so Dad's just pulling out the retainer bolt. Now there's only one on this side. There was only 3 on the other front, so I had to make some. They're pretty rare to find these days. And because they're rare and hard to find, on this side, they've put bolts in and then they've just ground the head of the bolt off so the wheel fits, which is not a good thing, because now we're going to have to try to cut a slot with a grinder and then try to get them out with a flathead screwdriver. We'll see how we go. Yeah, big flathead. Oh, there you go. Got that one out. Looks in pretty good nick. Those brake pads are nearly new, but covered in oil. Pull the brake pads off, just lift up on the springs. It's a bit stuck in there. There we go. So on the bottom, pull that off. Keep our springs, we don't want to lose them. Spiders everywhere. Now we'll take off the wheel cylinders. The other side is leaking a huge amount of brake fluid. We'll show that. So this wheel cylinder here, you can see the seals have gone in it. So it's been leaking brake fluid all over the whole brake drum, and consequently the pads have been saturated in brake fluid, so they're all no good, unfortunately. Well, it's always a good sign when there's no real wear and our oil is nice and clean. It's as clear as honey. It's obviously had a oil change and not been used much after that. How good is that? Righto, just want to undo this retaining bolt here that's holding in our support pin. So to do that, it's pretty tight. I'm going to try to just hold these in place with a bar on both sides, and then we'll try to get it undone. Put that on there. just 12 mil. Right, before we get too far, just try and line and set everything up. We've got our C-clips. I'm actually going to spin them around so they're facing the other way, so they don't fall off. Get ourselves set up. Sometimes these will just fall out. Take that pin out. Looks just like that. A bit of a push from the top. There we go. Okay, so that's just carefully grab that inside. Might get some long nose pliers to get that. Righto, so Dad, I'm going to get you to push that in a second. Just wait, and then I'm gonna, when you push that in, going to push this shaft in, and it's going to let me get that C-clip. Righto, so just push it in. Yep, whoop, stop. There it is.
Right, good.
Nice, heavy. Perfect. Alright, so Dad pulled the shaft out. Now our inner race here for the bearing, it's actually quite damaged and worn. Whoops. You can see it's got a big lip right here. So it's pretty damaged. Looks like it's been heated. I don't know if it's been heated just from someone trying to remove it at one stage, or whether it's run out of oil or something. So it's got a lot of heat temperature marks there. What we're going to do is going to remove this backing plate, and then we can try to get in there and tap it out. We may even have to cut this, slide it off, or heat it, but we'll take it all as it comes. So what we're going to do is just sit that in place. Give it a little bit of a spray to give us a helping hand. Just with a wheel nut on the top to protect the thread. Take out each wheel stud. Plate off it. It's our dust seal. With a gasket on there too, we might as well remove that. We don't have a spare gasket, so we'll actually keep that gasket and try and make one from that. And now it gives us a bit of access. We might be able to get up there, tap it off, or cut it off. Righto, you can see that I've got a grinder in my hand. We're taking extreme measures now. The original Toyota manual just tells you to tap it off with a cold chisel. Now I think there's been some damage, there's heat like I explained before. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to cut extremely carefully. We do not want to touch the inner machined piece whatsoever. So we're going to take it pretty carefully, and then we're going to split it with a cold chisel right at the end and hopefully pop it off. It'll either be a success. Let's just go with success. Now we've split it, so we've cracked it, so hopefully that'll give us enough to get it off now. There we go. Winner! Alright, so the heat from the grinding wheel into there has expanded the metal. It's also given us a thin piece that we're able to crack it with the cold chisel, and it's taken it off here. So we've cleaned that surface up. We'll be able to take that off now. We'll be able to put the new one on, put the new bearings and seals on, and we're done. Just cleaning this up with 1500 grit, so really, really fine. And all we're doing is just removing any type of small burr or a little bit of rust or anything on there that might be on there. Righto, so our new inner race, it has these two little divots here. I guess they're there to make it easier to get off. Not that that helped us today. Slide that over. You get to that point there. Righto, so I've just ripped the second shaft out. Now, again, this inner race of the bearing here, it actually looks in a lot better condition than the last one, but as soon as you run your finger over it, you can actually feel there's a bit of an indent in there, and it's worn in. So again, no good. We'll rip this one off, and hopefully we'll get this one off a little bit easier. We'll see how we go. I don't like my chances, but just going to use a very slight, a little bit of heat. You've got to be very careful when you're heating this. You don't want to overheat it. You don't want to glue the bearing at all. So we're just giving it a little bit of heat. I've got the old bearing we've cut off just sitting at the bottom there. I'm going to use it like a slide hammer and tap it on place. So we want to try to get that heat as even as possible. And we don't want to heat it too much, like I said, because you don't want it to go into the shaft. Otherwise the metal in the shaft will expand as well, and then we'll get nowhere. I don't think we're going to need much heat, just enough to get it on, and then it'll stay in place. So let's try that. Nearly there. Perfect. Righto, so that was pretty easy and pretty straightforward. But you've got to be very careful using heat. If you put too much heat into it, you're going to damage the bearing race. If you put too much heat in it, it's going to go into the shaft. And what we're trying to do is expand the metal of the bearing and not the shaft. So take it easy, don't go crazy. So that was the old one we split off. And like we saw, we just used that as a slide hammer, so we didn't damage this bearing whatsoever. Now, that's not hot at all. It's warm, but it's not hot. I didn't want to go too crazy or too hot. I didn't want to put too much heat into that. In case you're wondering, Dad's had to go home, so I'm running solo again. Right, just a quick clean up just so we don't get as dirty trying to pull all this apart. So what we're going to do now is show you an easy way of trying to get out our seal and our inner bearing. If you've got an internal bearing puller, well, you've hit a home run. There's not much to it. Put the internal bearing puller on, screw it up, and it'll pull the whole bearing out. If you don't, it's going to be quite difficult to get out this internal bearing, but I'm going to show you a little bit of a trick to get it out. First thing we want to do is just pull out this lip seal. Now I've got a little slide hammer here. This didn't cost much at all, and you can pretty much make your own slide hammer. It's pretty much a tube, and you can use whatever bit of heavy metal with a hole in it to bang things out with. All I did was weld on a nut to some multi-grips, and this here comes in handy for a whole stack of stuff. So you can pull out dints, you can pull out seals, you can pull out bearings, all sorts of stuff. So either make yourself a little slide hammer or splurge out and buy one. And you can use it for a whole range of applications. Pretty cool actually, and so simple. So what we're going to do now is, like we've done on many cases before to pull out bearings, drill 2 holes, put screws in, and just bang it out with the slide hammer. If you don't have a slide hammer, just get some multi-grips or some pliers and just knock it out, and that seal will come out fairly easy actually. These are just little wood screws. There's nothing special about them at all. Use any screws you like, really. Do one side, come over to the other side. Like I said, if you had a bearing puller, this would make life so much easier. But I don't have a bearing puller big enough. I don't have an internal bearing puller big enough to pull this out. A little really small one for small bearings, but it's not big enough to grab hold of this. So what I'm actually going to do is the internal cage of this bearing, we're going to rip it out and all the rollers out, so it's just the outer sleeve of the bearing. Then we're going to run a bead of weld around the whole inside of that bearing, and what that's actually going to do is shrink the metal. I know it sounds strange, heat normally expands metal. It's actually going to pull that bearing in, then we'll be able to knock it out. So we're just going to grab hold of the lip here with our multi-grips. You can see we're starting to damage that inside cage, and that's exactly what we want. We want to rip that inside cage completely out. Just like that. That's the inside cage of the bearing. Most of these rollers have already fallen out. Just knock the last little bits of rollers out. So knock all those little rollers out. Now, all we're going to do is clean the inside of that up so that we can weld inside it and hopefully knock that out. Righto, so we've got a bit of oil and stuff inside there. Now that's obvious because our diff's full of oil, but we need to clean all that out before we can put some weld down, otherwise the weld just won't stick. So this is where our R1 comes into its own. Now this stuff is a multi-purpose lubricant. It can be used on so many applications. It's like a full-on miracle spray. It's so awesome, I love it. But the best thing about this stuff, unlike most multi-purpose lubricant sprays, this stuff is non-flammable. So that's a big key when I'm doing stuff like this. So for instance, if you want to spray this just down on a workbench and you don't want it to rust, but you also use that workbench for welding, well, you need a non-flammable spray. So this stuff will prevent rust as well as penetrate into things and work stuff out, as well as clean up any oil and residue and stuff. So we're going to spray it in here, clean all this up so we can get ready to weld. And being non-flammable, we're not going to have any danger of any flashback or any dramas like that. You can see it's sort of pretty much washed all that oil out of there, prepping the surface ready to be welded on. So as well as cleaning all the oil and dirt and everything out of where we want to weld and get it in, being a penetrative oil, it also has its penetration properties, so it's actually going to get in underneath that bearing and also help it come out. Let's clean that up beautifully now. Using one of the old kids' bed sheets again. So it's important anytime you do any type of welding on your car that your battery and your electronics are disconnected. So we've made sure that we've done that today. I'm going to take my beanie off for this one. It's getting cold. Righto, so now that we've done that, I can actually see it's actually shrunk a little bit. So we had no dramas because we had the R1. So there's nothing that was going to catch on fire. If that was any other type of multi-lubricant, there'd be flames coming out of there to get a bit of flashback. It could be quite dangerous. So The R1 is really coming to its own there. I've got one of the old leaf pins and I just cut that down. And we're going to put that in the inside of the bearing, put on the slide hammer, and hopefully it'll knock straight out. Now it's okay if you don't have a MIG welder, but you do have a stick welder. Another trick is you can get your stick, you can weld around halfway, weld it around, and then just turn your welder off. That way you've got a stick hanging out. Put a new stick on, weld around the other halfway, turn your welder off. Those two sticks will stick there, and you could even use them to pull out your old internal bearing. Moment of truth. Oh, hang on a second. I might not even need the slide hammer. That has nearly come out all the way without me doing anything. How good is that? So we only need the slide hammer for the last little bit. Look at that. It's an old leaf pin. Now that'll be pretty hot. Make sure you got gloves on. And that bearing, it almost slid out on its own. So it's a combination of our R1 and our welding made the job so much easier. I can guarantee you if you try doing that without welding and you just try to get it with a slide hammer, you are going to have a stack of problems. So it's a really good little trick to learn. Alright, so I've just cleaned all up inside of here. There was tiny little bits of slag and stuff in there, but we cleaned all that up. Now we've got a little bit of a benefit on our side because it's so cold here at the moment. That's warm because we've just welded it, so that's great. And our bearing, it's been sitting in the shed all night. It's quite cold. Because this is warm, it's hopefully expanded the metal just a fraction. Because our bearing's cold, been sitting in the shed all night, hopefully it'll be a little bit smaller, we'll be able to get it on. Now we've got a little ring that was at the back of that bearing. I'm just going to slip that back in place. Get our brand new bearing. Just sit that there. Just going to slight tap with just a copper hammer. Then, using our old bearing that we knocked out, I've cut a slit in it like I have with every other bearing. We can use that to knock in our new bearing. That way we're not going to hit on this and we're not going to damage anything. Quick spray with some penetrant. Righto, that's home. Exactly the same thing with our new seal. Now you can get all these parts from Online Auto Parts. Put our new seal in place. Again, we can sort of press that in with our fingers just a little bit. Same trick with our bearing. Just tap that seal in. Perfect. Righto, just like that. How easy was that? New bearing and new seal, all replaced, ripped out the old one. Who would have ever thought? A little bit of non-flammable penetrant oil and a welder. Pop it out, put the new one straight back in. We'll do the other side, then we start putting the axles and everything back together. Righto guys, that's the end of part one. As you saw, we got the axles out, bearings in, seals in, and it's taken a bit longer than I actually thought it was going to take. So got tied up with some different stuff. So we're going to leave that for now. We're going to move on to part two. All new wheel cylinders, new brake shoes, we'll clean up all the backing pad, reinstall all the axles, gaskets, all that type of stuff. So that'll be part two, so that'll be next week. So if you're keen to keep up with what's going on, make sure you subscribe. Feel free to give me a thumbs up. leave a comment down below, unless you're going to hack on me for trying to skip ads so I miss out on a couple dollars. Yeah, whoever you are. But until next time, take care of yourselves.